Good morning, students. So today let's take a closer look at the methods. Every method is identified by its name. A method may or may not have parameters. We may also refer to the parameters as arguments. A method has its own body. A method may or may not have return type. If a particular method returns a value, then that method will have its return type. But if a method do not return any value, then that particular method will not have its return type. And lastly, a method may or may not have access specifiers. Let's start with the method name. A method is identified by its name. Now consider this Java program. This Java program creates a class called currency, and inside this class they have a method, and the name of the method is convert. Now the name of the method must not contain blank spaces or special characters. This means for this method called convert, if you try to put blank spaces in between the characters, then this is unacceptable in Java. Java do not allow putting blank spaces between the characters of a method name. In addition to that, you cannot even put special characters such as $, hash, ampersand, or whatever. So such types of special characters cannot be put between the characters of a method name. Even this is unacceptable in Java. So the best way to write the method name is without blank spaces and special characters. So remove these blank spaces and special characters. The method consists only the letters. This is acceptable in Java. Now see the third point. Keywords cannot be used as method name. In Java, there are many keywords. Some of the keywords in Java are the data types, such as float, int, etc. The return type, such as void. This is also another keyword. Then you have some more keyword. New. New is also one such keyword in Java. This new keyword is used to create an object of the class currency, and the name of the object that was created is $. So such keywords such as new, void, static, float. There can be in fact many more keywords in Java. Those types of keywords can't be used as method names. Say for example, if you use this keyword new as a name for the method, then this is unacceptable in Java. Okay, so if you use a method name that resembles a keyword, this is unacceptable in Java. So try not to put the method names similar to keywords such as new, float, static, void, public, int, string, etc. So it is better to keep a method name that do not resemble the keywords. Name of a method must start with the letter. If you see the method here identified by the name convert, it starts with the letter C. So this is acceptable in Java. But you cannot start a method name with a number, say 7. This is not acceptable in Java. So every method name must start with a letter. So in place of 7 you can put a letter. This is acceptable in Java. So it is mandatory that the first letter of the method must be a letter, but the rest of the characters can be letters as well as digits. So after putting the first letter as R, which is acceptable, this is because the first letter starts the mark of a method name. But you can even put numbers. Once the first character of the method starts with a letter. So this is also acceptable in Java. So every method in Java should be identified by a name, and the name should start with a letter. It should not start with a digit or a special character or a blank space. But soon after declaring the first character of the method by a letter, the rest of the characters in the method name can be letters as well as digits. But it cannot accept blank spaces or special characters. So let's recapitulate. This is not acceptable because the method name contains blank spaces in between the letters. Even this is also not acceptable because the method name contains special characters in between the letters. This is also not acceptable because the method name is starting with a digit. This is acceptable because the method name is starting with a letter, and here the letter is C. A method can contain letters as well as digits once the starting character is identified by a letter, but the subsequent characters can be a letter as well as digit. So CONV8ERT, this is acceptable in Java. So I hope you understood very clearly. Now let's keep this method name as convert, how it was before. Let's come to the next topic, which is parameters. We also refer to the parameters as arguments. The parameters or the arguments are optional, and they provide the mechanism to pass input to the methods when it is called. Now consider the method named convert belonging to the class called currency. This method named convert consists of two parameters or two arguments. The first one is the parameter AMT of type float, and the second one is the parameter ROE of type float. These two parameters will take the value that will be copied from the parameters $.amount for AMT and $.rate of exchange for the parameter ROE. Where input to $.amount is coming from here, which is 10.0, which will be then supplied to the first argument AMT, and the input to $.rate of exchange is coming from here, which is 60.0, and that will be copied and supplied to the second argument, which is ROE. Now remember that inputs get supplied when the control shifts from the calling method, okay, when the control shifts from the calling method to the call method. Remember this. And both this calling method and call method should have the same method name, and only when the calling method have its method name which resembles the method name of the call method, then the control can shift from the calling method to the call method to supply these inputs to the arguments of the call method. Come to the next point. A method can take one or more parameters of system or user defined type. Now considering this method called convert, it may take one parameter as well as more than one parameter. If you take only one parameter, then you can omit the second parameter, which is ROE in this case. You can just keep one parameter for this method, that is AMT. Or if you want to put more than one parameter, then you can again include the second one, which is float ROE. Then come to the next point, which is the method body. Every method should have its body. The opening and the closing curly braces define the scope or the body of the method. Now if you consider this Java program, the body of the method called convert, starts with this opening curly brace and closes with this closing curly brace. Now this is the scope of the method convert, which is within the opening and the closing curly braces, and inside the body of the method there will be a set of action statements. Now in this method called convert, there are two action statements. The first one is the action statement system.out.println, which prints the text amount in dollar, and then the value of the amount, which is the value of AMT. Again, for this main method, this is the opening curly brace and this is the closing curly brace. Now there are many action statements in the body of this main method, so you can count how many. This is the first one, second one, third one, fourth one, fifth one, sixth one. So in total there are 6 action statements that exist inside the body of this main method, whereas there were only 2 action statements inside the body of the method convert. So a method body may contain one or more action statements. Now see the syntax. A method is identified by its method name. Then it can have parameters. We call these parameters as arguments. These parameters are optional. Then a method can also have its return type. I will be explaining you about this in the next slide. Then see this opening curly brace and the closing curly brace specifies the scope of this method, and inside this body or the scope of this method you can have a block of action statements. So this is basically the syntax of declaring a method, and every method that you declare along with its body will follow this syntax. Now let's come to the next topic, which is the return type. A method may return a value, and the value returned by the method is specified by its return type. So the return type specifies the data type of the value returned by the method. If a method returns an integer value, the return type will be int. Or if a method returns a decimal value, the return type will be float. But if a method does not return any value, then its return type will be void. In all these cases, the return keyword is used to return a value from a method. Now consider the Java program in this slide. This program consists of one method called convert. This method has its return type as float. Why do you think so? This is because this method is returning a value, which is the product or the multiplication of the first argument AMT with the second argument ROE, and this value will be a decimal value. This is because the argument AMT is of type float, and also the argument ROE is of type float for accepting decimal values. Since both of these arguments are of type float, so the final value, which will be the product or the multiplication of the arguments AMT and ROE, will also be of type float, as it will be a decimal value, and that's why the return type for this method convert will also be float. And whenever you return a value from a method, it should be preceded by this return keyword. Now let's come to the next topic, which is the access specifiers. The access specifiers define the scope of the method and are optional. A public method is accessible outside the class, whereas private methods are accessible within the body of the class only. That means if you define the access specifier for this method called convert to be public, then this particular method called convert will be accessible outside the class called currency. That is, this method convert will be accessible to any methods which are declared outside the scope of this class called currency. But if this method convert is defined by the access specifier private instead of public, then this method convert will not be accessible to any methods outside this class called currency. In short, this method convert will not be accessible outside this class called currency. But if we consider this method called main, it has been declared with the access specifier public, so this method will be accessible outside this class called currency. Now what if we do not specify an access specifier for a method? That means if we do not specify access specifiers for a method like public and private, then by default this method convert will come to be known as a friendly method. So a friendly method is a method which do not contain any access specifiers. Now if you see this method public static void main, this is not a friendly method. This is because this main method consists of the access specifier public, but this method convert, since it does not contain access specifiers like public and private, so this method is treated as a friendly method. Now first of all, what do you mean by friendly methods? A friendly member method is a method which is accessible to all the classes of the same package. Now what do you mean by a package? A package is a group of classes. Now if you consider this example, this program consists of only one class and the name of it is currency. Now consider a scenario where there are more classes, and if we include those classes along with this class currency, then they will fall into a package. Then if a particular method is a friendly method, then that particular method will be accessible to all the classes of the same package, but it won't be accessible to the classes which will be outside of the package.